So CHE 212 is basically fundamentals of biochemistry or introduction to biochemistry. Should you have a question or a concern, you can write me an email at that email given down there. In terms of the course overview, I have shared the course outline with David. I hope he's shared it in the group. So we have about 9 topics to go through. The first one is a very small component, but then the other 8, I think they are the larger topics. So I'll encourage you, like I've said, to spend a little bit more time on this course. This is because most of the concepts that are introduced in this course, they're a bit abstract, they're a bit new, and therefore they require a little bit of consistency for you to grasp the knowledge. But otherwise, in terms of the prerequisites, the knowledge that is required for you to understand this, you are fully equipped, assuming that obviously you understood your first year and also your second year first part. This includes some organic chemistry. So because we do a lot of structure writing, so you have to practice on that. In terms of continuous assessment, the continuous assessment is 40%, as we all know. Assignments are assigned 5%. So if you have 3 assignments, then the average of those 3 will make up the 5%. Then tests are 20%. A number of times we have about 2 tests, meaning that each test will carry 10%. And then the lab work, when you are back on campus, you're going to do labs. So if you do 4 labs, then those will be graded out of 15%. So making a total of 40%. But there are also times when I may be, compelled to give a quiz or 2 quizzes. So this distribution will be redone. So for example, maybe tests can be 15%, then the quiz 5%, and so on. But otherwise, ultimately, the continuous assessment is 40%. So let's come back to biochemistry. What is biochemistry? Basically, biochemistry is simply defined as the chemistry of living things. So chemistry, we're looking at reactions that occur in systems. Now, these systems, when you say biochemistry, we are looking at things that have got life. So basically, in short, we are saying, what are these reactions that are occurring in a living system? So our understanding of biochemistry is very, very important. So what is the role of this biochemistry? So it provides the fundamental understanding of the molecular basis for function or malfunction of living things. Secondly, it provides a broad understanding of the molecular basis of life. And then lastly, but interrelated to 1 and 2, is that it explains what goes wrong to produce disease. So basically, biochemistry goes into, the molecular component of a living system. Now, when you go to the basic, you are going to the cell. So we're looking at cellular processes that occur within these living organisms. How do the biomolecules interact to produce what we ultimately call life? So for biochemistry, basically, we're looking at the sum total of reactions within a cell, which basically, to a layman, constitute what we call life. So basically, the next question that somebody can ask is, what is the impact of biochemistry in medicine. Okay, what is the impact of biochemistry in agriculture? What is the impact of biochemistry in industrial applications or in environmental applications? So, for example, in medicine, the molecular basis of disease is determined under biochemistry. So ideally, diseases like sickle cell anemia are a baby of biochemistry. So the understanding of these chemical reactions, the molecular structures, have given, basis to understand disease. Now, disease is a baby of medicine, right? So we can come up with, um, drugs um, to treat those diseases because we understand them. Also, in drugs, it means that we are talking about pharmacy. So pharmaceutical chemistry is also, impacted from biochemistry. When you look at agriculture, the production of pesticides, herbicides, requires an understanding of um, uh, biochemical reactions. How can we eliminate this weed, or how can we eliminate this insect using a herbicide? So all that is biochemistry. In terms of industrial applications, the production of beer, that is brewing industry. We use enzymes. In soap making, that is all biochemistry. So biochemistry has got a large impact on a number of sectors. In environmental applications, there are times when certain areas are polluted environmentally. So you can use biological systems to remove such a pollution. I do recall that there was a concern at one point where the population of mosquitoes was very high in certain areas in Zambia, and there was a project to breed fishes that could eat the mosquito larvae so that they can reduce their population. So that is just an example. Let's go to topic number 1, having introduced what biochemistry is. So our topic number 1 is biophysical chemistry. At the end of this lecture, hopefully you should be able to describe the properties of water as a solvent for biochemical reactions. Secondly, describe the ionization of a water molecule. Thirdly, define pH, and through calculations, determine the pH values of given solutions using the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. So basically, I think in this lecture, we're going to deal with the first 3 objectives, and then we'll look at, definition of buffers, and also a little bit more of calculations in the next lecture. So let's begin with water. We all know what water is. We cannot overemphasize its importance. So today we want to, look at water and its importance from a biochemistry point of view. So we all know that living things are dependent on water, and life as we know it on Earth is because there is an abundance of water. So inside the body, cells have between 70 to 95% of water, but the human body itself contains about 60% of water. So the abundance of water is a major reason life is supported on Earth. So if life is dependent on water, then it means that water has got certain properties which are ideal, for life to exist. So some of the properties of water which, support life are that, 1, it is a universal solvent. Now, when you've got a universal solvent, it means that, this is a solvent that can, to a larger extent, to a larger degree, can, dissolve the highest number of, substances. Secondly, it is an ideal biologic agent or medium for ionization of substances and therefore hasten chemical reactions. This is one of the most important property of water. One thing that you have to realize is that the solubilization of substances into ionic forms is very key to the existence of life. So most of these substances, if they cannot ionize, it's very difficult for them to be mobile. Thirdly, it has a high specific heat. That is, it takes up more heat to raise its temperature through 1 degree Celsius, therefore allowing the body to store heat effectively without raising its temperature so much. Okay. So this property actually is very important because it helps the body to maintain its internal temperature as one of the homeostatic properties. Number 4, it possesses a high latent heat of vaporization. It has the capacity also to conduct heat readily. Okay. Other factors or properties of water, you can read about them. I'm sure we know them and we can write them, like cohesion and so on. Let's look at the structure. So water, as we know it, has got 2 hydrogen atoms, each attached to an oxygen atom by a single covalent bond. So the key to water's unusual properties is that the electrons of each covalent bond are not shared equally between the oxygen and the hydrogen atom. When you look at this structure of water, so you have oxygen at the center and 2 hydrogen atoms. One of the most important characteristics in this structure is that the oxygen is a highly electronegative atom. Now, electronegative atoms tend to draw electrons towards themselves and therefore would, will make themselves become highly electronegative or highly negative around themselves. Now, an electronegative, or rather a highly electronegative atom, would mean that it will have all electrons drawn to itself, meaning that the atoms to which it is bonded to become electron deficient. Now, when hydrogen is, when it loses, or rather when the electron is drawn away from it and the electron is residing more on the oxygen atom, it means that this hydrogen will have no electron sitting around it and therefore will assume a positive charge. The same thing happens with this hydrogen. Okay, and then it assumes a slightly positive charge. The oxygen, because it is an electron-rich atom, it will assume a slightly negative charge. Now, you do know that oxygen has got has got 6 electrons in its outermost shell. Now, these electrons that are 6, 1 will be shared there, 1 will be shared there, but ideally it's residing on the oxygen atom. But then it would also have 2 lone pairs of electrons. So these 2 lone pairs of electrons will cause a repulsion on these electrons here and therefore push the hydrogen inside. And then the bond angle between hydrogen and oxygen, right? Rather, the bond angle between hydrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen becomes a skewed bond, which is about 104.9 degrees Celsius. In other literature or texts, you find that it's given as 105 degrees Celsius. Now, this is an unusual bond for the type of structure that water has. Okay, so that skewed structure is very important because it actually brings another concept on the water molecule in that the bond angle between hydrogen and oxygen, and this hydrogen and oxygen is not equal. Okay, or rather the distance between the hydrogen and oxygen and this hydrogen is not equal, and therefore the charge, the net charge on the water molecule is not zero. It is slightly a negative charge. Okay, now because of that, this introduces what we call polarity. So a polar molecule will have two charges that are asymmetrically distributed, which is also referred to as also having dipole moments. So a dipole molecule is one that has got an asymmetrically distributed charge. Now, the partial positive charge of the water molecule and the partial negative charge of the oxygen atom means that there can be an attraction that will form between the partially positive end and the partially negative end of one water molecule to another, as shown in this diagram here. So you have a hydrogen here, which forms an attraction with the oxygen atom of another water molecule, and also this side, the same orientation. And this attraction between a partially positive hydrogen atom of one water molecule with an oxygen atom, or the negative portion of another water molecule, is what is called as a hydrogen bond. So due to the polarity of a water molecule, it is able to form what are known as hydrogen bonds. So the unequal sharing of electrons that I was talking about causes the oxygen end of the molecule to have a slight negative charge, while the end of the two hydrogen atoms is slightly positive. So a molecule in which opposite ends have got opposite electric charges is called a polar molecule, and water is a polar molecule. So water is a compound consisting of polar molecules. Now, hydrogen bonds, I've already mentioned that a hydrogen bond is an attraction between the slightly positive, partially positive hydrogen part of one water molecule being attracted to the partially negative oxygen atom of another water molecule. But generally, a hydrogen bond is a bond that is formed when an unshielded hydrogen nucleus covalently is bound to another, to an electron withdrawing oxygen or nitrogen atom, and can interact with an unshared electron pair on another oxygen or nitrogen atom. So basically, usually hydrogen bonds are formed when the hydrogen is bonded to a highly electronegative atom. An example is oxygen and oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur. So these atoms, if they are bonded to hydrogen, then there is a possibility of forming a hydrogen bond with another oxygen or nitrogen atom. So water molecules are attracted to one another in a specific way. The slightly negative oxygen end of one molecule attracts the slightly positive hydrogen end of adjacent water molecules. So this point here is shown in the diagram that we saw earlier on. So we are saying one portion of the hydrogen, partially positive hydrogen end, is attracted to the partially negative portion of another water molecule. Okay, so you'd find that these hydrogen bonds, they are attractions between atoms in different water molecules. So the attraction in hydrogen bonds is not as strong as an ionic bond because electrons are not transferred. Remember that in an ionic bond, there is complete transfer of electrons from one atom to another. But the hydrogen bonds, they are covalent bonds, except that these covalent bonds, they occur between a highly electronegative atom and an electropositive atom. So hydrogen bonding profoundly influences the physical properties of water and accounts for its exceptionally high viscosity, surface tension, and boiling point. So surface tension, boiling point, and also viscosity. These are properties that result from hydrogen bonding, even cohesion and also adhesion. So on average, each molecule in water, which is liquid water, associates through hydrogen bonds with 3.5 other water molecules. So in liquid water, each water molecule is surrounded by 3.5 water molecules. So if we come back to this structure here, so we are saying this one water molecule is surrounded by 1, 2, 3 and a half water molecule. That is in liquid water. But in solid water, each water molecule is surrounded by 4 water molecules as indicated here. So this would be a structure extracted from solid water. And we all know what solid water is. Okay. So the oxygen atoms of aldehydes, ketones, and also amides provide pairs of electrons that can serve as hydrogen acceptors. So in biological systems, you will find that biomolecules that contain functional groups that are aldehydes, ketones, and also amides, these will provide pairs of electrons which can serve as hydrogen acceptors. And therefore, you would find that these functional groups will actually form hydrogen bonds. And this is key actually to formation of the three-dimensional structures that are so important for functional aspects of these biomolecules, such as the proteins. So the polar nature of water and the effects of hydrogen bonding explain most of water's unique properties. We've already mentioned that some of these included the high viscosity, we mentioned surface tension, and also mentioned boiling point. So cohesion and adhesion, temperature moderation, the lower density of ice compared to liquid water, and also water's ability to dissolve other substances. All these are key properties of water. So when water is the solvent, the result is called an aqueous solution. I'm sure we know this. So water is the main solvent inside all cells, in blood and in plant sap or cell sap. You find that blood plasma is a solution because it contains particles that are dissolved in water. The plant cell sap is also called as an aqueous solution because they are ions, the substances that are dissolved in the solvent water. So water dissolves an enormous variety of solutes necessary for life due to its polarity and also hydrogen bonding ability. So there are two aspects of water that make it to be a very good solvent. One is polarity and also hydrogen bonding. Most substances that are also polar, they are highly soluble in water. And most substances that are polar, they are able to form hydrogen bonds. So the two actually flow together. So I've already mentioned in terms of the structure that water has an irregular, slightly skewed structure. And this is also referred to as a tetrahedron with oxygen at its center. In first year, you looked at different structures of compounds, and I'm sure you looked at the structure of water as being a tetrahedron that has got a bond angle between hydrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen to be 104.9 degrees. Sometimes we round up that to 105 degrees. So this actually deviates from the normal tetrahedral angle, which is expected of all tetrahedrons, which have a bond angle of about 109.5 degrees. If you round this up, you get about 110 degrees Celsius. So that 5 degree difference in bond angle has got life-saving consequences. So water is a dipole, which is a molecule with electrical charge distributed asymmetrically about its structure. I did mention this. And then we are also saying water is a strong dipole and has a high dielectric constant. A high dielectric constant, or rather a dielectric constant, refers to the ability of a molecule to retain electric charge in an electric field. So it's a strong dipole and has high dielectric constant, which enable it to dissolve large quantities of charged compounds, such as salts. So it's been observed that molecules that have got a high dielectric constant also have a high ability to dissolve an enormous amount of substances. And among all compounds that are known on Earth, water has got the highest dielectric constant. So we know that the interaction of water with biomolecules influences their structure. You can agree with me that if you got, for example, cooking oil and poured it in water, its structure immediately changes. So this is proof that interaction of biomolecules like lipids with water will actually change their structure. That's why we're saying influences their structure. So covalent and non-covalent bonds will actually stabilize these biomolecules. And we have said that these covalent bonds, some of them are hydrogen bonds, and the non-covalent bonds are, ionic bonds, van der Waals forces, hydrophobic interactions, and also, you also have some form of intermolecular forces. All these actually work together to stabilize these biomolecules. So each time I'm talking about biomolecules, I'm talking about proteins, I'm talking about lipids, I'm talking about carbohydrates, I'm talking about nucleic acids. Okay, so though covalent bonds are the strongest force that hold these molecules together, non-covalent bonds, which we've talked about here, ionic bonds, you can also talk about disulfide bonds, van der Waals forces, hydrogen bonds, all these make significant contributions to the structure, stability, and also functional competence of macromolecules in living organisms. This is very key to understand. Now, in biology, we know that there is a saying, a very simple saying, that structure determines function. So the structure of a biomolecule, the structure of a protein, will ultimately determine whether it's functional or non-functional. So it is very important to have the correct structure. All right, so for the first session, we shall end here. I'm down to 1 minute. I'll send the link for the continuation in about a minute or so. So let's continue after a minute and a half. Okay, thank you.